We're very excited to be here today and share some information about advanced care planning. So again, just to reinforce, I'm Linda Curdy-Bess. I'm the manager of advanced care planning for Corewell Health East, formerly Beaumont Health. And Carol Muscat is a geriatric social worker who I work closely with at one of our geriatric clinics. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So our objectives today are to discuss and define what we mean by advanced care planning, to offer considerations to guide you in selecting a patient advocate, to give you some time to reflect on your own values and experiences, help you consider some possible future healthcare decisions, and talk about how you would transfer or document your wishes into a written plan. And then we'll talk about some ways to share that and then to understand what resources are available. So I like this little graphic, Begin the Conversation. There's some great resources on the Conversation Project, but I face the elephant in the room because this is a topic that is extremely important, but many people don't want to think about or talk about. But we're going to help make this a little bit easier today with our presentation. So we want to think about what do we mean by advanced care planning? So I'd like to welcome if anyone wants to offer up what advanced care planning, what they think that means. Just go ahead and shout it out.
End of life.
End of life, okay. Anything else?
Your wishes.
Letting the right people know. Anything else?
Having an advocate to do your choices.
And choosing and selecting or legally designating an advocate. Excellent. Okay. So advanced care planning we talk about as a process, right? This is not a one-time event because as we age, as we experience things, our wishes and our treatment preferences and even who we would trust to be our legally designated decision maker may change. Advanced care planning is really appropriate for all people over the age of 18. Why do I say that? So oftentimes we get in our head, this is about end of life and this is for sick or older people. But what have we learned in this last couple of years?
We don't know when the end is.
We don't know what's going to happen, right? Life is unpredictable. So it's best to be prepared. Some of us would say that's why we have like a life insurance policy. That's why we have health insurance or homeowners insurance. For that, the possibility that we might have a need, right? We're planning in the event that we need this. So it begins with that conversation about what's important to you, goals for care and treatment preferences, if you were to become too sick or injured and couldn't communicate your healthcare decisions yourself. It's person-centered. So by person-centered, I mean this is a way to be proactive and to take charge because you're doing this in advance. It's not at a crisis. It involves choosing and selecting a patient advocate. So that's that person that you would trust to be your legally designated decision maker and that you would share what's important to you with that person because how best can they represent you is if they know what's important to you, what is acceptable and unacceptable. And then advanced care planning hopefully results in the completion of a written document. It doesn't always, and conversations are just as important, but a written document is truly a way to legally designate and to have in writing a specific plan. So it's what we would like to see as an outcome, but we also recognize it won't always be an outcome. So again, advanced care planning, it's about thinking about it, right? Thinking about your goals and preferences for future healthcare decisions and who you would trust to represent you if you were unable to make your own medical decisions. And then talking about it with those that are closest to you, talking about it with that patient advocate, talking about it with other family members, talking about it with your healthcare provider so that he or she is aware of some of your healthcare decisions. And then writing it outlined in a legal document like an advance directive, otherwise known as, in Michigan we don't make things easy, but advance directive is also a durable power of attorney for health care or a patient advocate designation. They all mean the same thing. You're legally designating who you would want to be your patient advocate, to be your medical decision maker, should there be a time you're unable to make your own medical decisions. And then sharing it. So years ago, documents were completed and they were kept in file cabinets or at the bank in a safety deposit box, right? Because these were important legal documents. Well, then what happens? Do you want your family to have to be shuffling through your file cabinet or running up to a bank to get a document in the time of a crisis? You need to share it. So these documents should be shared widely. They should be shared with your family members. They definitely should be shared with your patient advocate and with your provider or your healthcare system. So we can talk about some ways if you're a Corewell Health patient, but all health systems want these documents to be shared. Because should there be an event that they need to be called into place or put into place, they want them easily accessible to your healthcare team. It's the best way to make sure that your wishes and treatment preferences and values are honored, right? So it's a process, not a one-time event. So thinking about it, we always ask people, think about what are your fears or concerns about doing this type of planning? Can anyone just shout out some responses?
People don't want to think about it.
People don't want to think about it, right? It's hard. It's hard. It's scary. Yes. What else? What are some other fears and concerns?
Well, the uncertainty of it is you really don't know what the end is going to be like for you.
You really don't know.
Look at your parents and grandparents. But,
Right. You really don't know. So what we always talk about as being one of the most important things is who you would trust, right? Who is that person that you would write down that you would want to represent you should there be a time, temporarily or permanently, that you're unable to make your own medical decisions. And then you talk with that person about what's important to you, what living well means, what's experiences that you've had with other family members can be extremely helpful because those experiences resonate with us, right? Many of us think about, I never want it to be like that, or I want it to be like that. So many times people have fears or worries about, what if I change my mind? And that's why I say it's a process. You should change your mind. It's perfectly appropriate to change your mind. In fact, as you get older, as you experience divorce or deaths or a new diagnosis or decline in functioning, any of those things would be a reason why you'd want to look at your plan, make sure that it's still in alignment with what's important to you, make sure that that person is still the person that you would want to legally designate, that they're still willing to accept on that role. So it's not a one-time event. Some people worry, what if I make a treatment decision and that I don't want aggressive care? Am I not going to receive care? And we always want to reassure people, no matter what a decision you make, always you would be treated and provided comfort and care, regardless of a treatment decision that you've made. We would never stop taking care of you. And then for anyone who's already completed a document, because I'm hoping that some of you in this room have done some type of planning, what do you hope that document will do for you? Stand up. You hope that it's respected at the time that it's needed to be called on. Okay. It's a great answer. So those are some things that we ask people to think about. Fears or concerns, when you think about, and there's many that people have, it helps you to eliminate some of those barriers. If you think about what is a fear that you have about doing this type of planning, like can I change my mind and those types of things, it eliminates some of those barriers if you talk out loud about those or ask those questions. So again, keep going to the same thing, right? It's really repetitive because it's so important, like choosing that patient advocate. So thinking about who knows you well, who's willing to honor your wishes, even if they don't agree with them. So that's a big one. And who's available when I need them. So sometimes people will say to me, I don't have anyone. I wasn't married, I don't have children, I don't have anyone. And we get really stuck in this has to be a close family member. And it doesn't. It has to be anyone that you would trust that is willing to take on the role. So I always say, think outside of that box. Think outside of immediate family members. Sometimes immediate family members are somebody who maybe isn't the best person to legally designate because A, they might be too distraught to make decisions at that time. B, they might have a difference of opinion about care that you've decided that you want or don't want to receive, and so you're fearful that they're not going to respect and honor your treatment preferences. There are many reasons. If you, at the end of it, I have no one, I really can't think of anyone, then I would suggest that you complete a document that is as clear as possible about what's important to you. So that should anyone else have to step into a role without knowing anything about you, such as a legal guardian, they have some information that they can call upon. And then we had this really cute video.
Be your healthcare proxy? Like if you need someone to tell the doctor what to? I just go with whatever the doctors say. I wouldn't want to bother them. They're so busy. Doctors know best, right?
Be your healthcare proxy? Sure, I'd be happy to if I'm in town. Check out my Instagram pics from Peru. Wish you were here.
Oh, I could never let you go. I can't even throw a plant away. As long as it's got one little green leaf. I'd be like, can't we upload her to the cloud?
Well, heck yeah! I've given this a lot of thought. Let me tell you what decisions you're best off going with. You never let them resuscitate you. And if they even try to hook you up to one of those breathing machines, never! I got this! I totally got this!
How can you even talk about this? I can't, okay? I just can't. Mom, it's not like you're gonna die. No, I can't talk right now.
Oh wait, did I show you that meme from iFunny? The cat and the dishwasher? Oh my gosh, okay. So the cat's like, bleh. And then he's like, wah! Oh wait, sorry, what?
Well, hon, you and I have been through so much together. Here's what we'll do. We'll sit down, we'll get a cup of coffee, and you tell me what matters to you.
Well, it wouldn't be easy. I mean, I'd be sad, but I'd have your back.
I remember when we went through this with Mom, we really spoke for her. So I think I can do that for you. Let's talk about what you would want.
So a patient advocate, we say, I'm sorry you missed some of the video, we could replay it if we have time, should be someone who's willing to accept the role, right? So you never want to just complete a document, name someone, and not have a conversation with them or ask them if they're willing to take on that role. Because what does that result in? Then at a time where they're called upon, they don't even know that they've been named as the patient advocate. There's a lot of confusion. Sometimes there's doubt. So you want to ask them. It should be a role that they want to accept. And you could see in the video a little bit that some of those people couldn't even accept the role, and some of them, if they would have accepted, you wouldn't have wanted them to accept, right? So, and they should be willing to talk with you about what your goals are, right? What's important to you, what your values are, what kind of treatment preferences you might have. And then follow those decisions, follow those choices, even if they don't necessarily agree with them, and make decisions in difficult moments, because these are difficult moments. If you're unable to speak for yourself and they have to step into that role, that's a hard time for them. So Do you know anyone who could do this? Are some of you thinking already about who you might be able to ask? And for those of you that have already designated someone, does this confirm that you made a good decision?
Yes.
Yes. The only concern I have is the age of the person that I designate.
Yeah.
They're my age.
Okay. So someone expressed that choosing someone, sometimes if they're close to your age, is that a risk because they may have their own health issues or something else? We always suggest that you choose a successor, at least one, if not two, because there are times where that person may be unavailable, unwilling, or unable for whatever reason. Yes?
My attorney required that.
Your attorney required it. Okay, so the attorney was like, that's an important step to take. That's why we also talk about dusting off those documents every once in a while and making sure that they still are in alignment and that you don't need to make any changes. The other thing is reflecting upon experiences. So I talked a little bit about this, that people have often had experiences with someone close to them who was unable to communicate and someone else had to step in and make decisions. And so those experiences resonate with us. Does anyone have a brief story that they could share about an experience where they had to step into a role or know of a situation? Yes.
My father passed away. He was in a nursing home, and they called me and told me that I needed to go to the hospital. I thought they were throwing him out because he wasn't the best tempered person I know. And they said, no, we're not throwing him out. He's coughing up blood. So I get to the hospital. Of course, he's not there, but it was longer for me to get there than it would be for him to get there. But I went right to the hospital. He wasn't there at the present time. When I showed up, he yelled at me, where have you been? I said, I'm where the nursing home sent me. And the girl, what I didn't find pleasant about the experience, I knew my father was dying.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't accepting the death, never wanted to talk about it, didn't have any real wishes about it. And the nurse stood at the door and said, what is his wishes? And he looked at me and says, whatever she says.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that.
That
Yes.
was a terrible thing that she should not have brought up in front of him.
Well, so this is the importance of having a conversation with that patient advocate. You don't want that person to walk around wondering, did I decide what that person would have wanted? Did I do what my loved one, the decision that they would have wanted? Have we had any conversations about it, right? You can't have a decision about every possible healthcare decision, right? It would be impossible. But you can talk about really important things about what it means to live well and what sort of unacceptable and acceptable outcomes might be. But it's extremely important that you have those conversations. Otherwise, what ends up happening is family or that patient advocate walks away from an experience worried and wondering, did I do what mom or dad or my husband would have, or my wife would have wanted, instead of knowing? So I've done a lot of presentations in the community, and someone came up to me after one and shared that she had been her friend's patient advocate. And after the presentation, she said, I've been walking around for years feeling like the decision that I made resulted in my friend's death. And she said, and now I realize I didn't decide. She decided, and I was the person to speak what she wanted. That's the power of having a conversation. That's the power of knowing what someone would want or not want.
But what do you do with the person who doesn't want to discuss it?
So let's table that for a minute, and then hopefully we'll get to that, because that's a very good question. So thinking about it, spending time thinking about and reflecting on what gives your life meaning, right? I always say to people, it's important to think about a good day. What would a good day look like? What would I do? Who would I be with? Because when I understand what's important for me to have a great day or a good day, then I can begin to sort out, if I was unable to ever again do this, would that be something that would be acceptable to me or unacceptable? Would I be able to adapt to that or not? So whether it be interactive or being active or being with family, being with people that are close to you, those things are things that help in that conversation with your patient advocate so that they know if this could never happen again, maybe this would be the time where I would want to limit some of the care that's being offered. So what gives your life joy? What gives meaning? What are values that are important to you? How does religion or spirituality or your culture play a role? Because for some people, religion, spirituality, culture may dictate and help guide some of your healthcare decisions. But we would never know that on the hospital end unless you tell us. So again, that living well, if you're having a good day, what would happen? Who would you talk to? What would you do? And then beliefs. Those additional beliefs are things that are important to you, values that you have that would be helpful to share in a document, because then that helps us understand how to best support you, right? And in some cultures, in some religions, some care might be dictated by belief systems. So once you've been thinking about experiences you've had with others, what living well means, spirituality and culture and religion, then we ask you to think about, so then you're sharing all kinds of information with us, but also let's talk about goals of care for a severe permanent brain injury. And the reason why we have this kind of conversation is because it's a very clear scenario that helps some people understand or make a decision in their mind about, is this a situation where I would want to continue care, or is this a situation where I might want to limit care? And whatever you decide is appropriate. We need to know it, right? And your patient advocate needs to know it. So we talk about, imagine a scenario such as a sudden event like a car accident or a sudden illness left you unable to communicate. You're receiving all the care necessary to keep you alive, but the doctors believe there's little chance, and by little chance we mean less than 5%, that you will recover the ability to know who you are or who you are with. Does anyone have any questions about this scenario? Or any thoughts about it? So, it does happen. Mm-hmm. So, this is one of those things, again, you don't have to decide, and even if you did decide, well, I want to continue medical treatment, it's a treatment preference. That doesn't mean if something should happen in the future, that's the treatment preference at that time. There may be many other extenuating circumstances. It just helps us understand, because for many people, that inability to know who they are or who they're with is a really defining moment. So we're asking you to think about, would you want to continue or start medical treatment, or would you want to stop or withdraw medical treatment or not start? And as I said, any answer is the correct answer. It's what's important to you, right? Another thing that many documents ask you to think about is a CPR question. Again, it's just a treatment preference. So oftentimes we have people who complete a document and maybe have something in there about, I don't want to receive CPR if my heart and breathing stops. That's a preference. That's not a medical order. Every time you go into the hospital, a doctor has to place a medical order. If you're out in the community, you need to have a medical order that is completed by a physician and you and 2 witnesses to ensure that you would not receive CPR. CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, is the only medical intervention that you receive unless you tell us you don't want it. Every other medical treatment you consent to, right? Even when you get a vaccine, you sign a consent. When you go to the lab and your blood drawn, you're giving consent. This is the only medical intervention everyone receives unless you expressly tell someone that you do not want to receive it. So it's important that you learn more about CPR, that you understand what it is, that it's attempts to restart your heart and breathing, that you talk with your doctor about it, and what your chances would be if you were in a situation like this, and then understanding what some of the benefits and burdens of CPR are. Like, so what are some of the possible outcomes after an attempt at CPR? So in your packets is a CPR fact sheet. It's just information. You could take it to your doctor and discuss it further, but it is something to think about, because what is the one question you always get asked when you come into the hospital? This is one of the questions. If your heart and breathing were to stop, do you want us to make attempts to restart them? And probably they don't ask like that. They probably say, do you want CPR? And some people don't even know what that is. So this is just an opportunity to think about what you will learn more about it so that you can make a decision that fits what's important to you. And I am going to now hand it off to Carol.
How do I advance the
arrow right here.
Okay. All right, so once we've thought about all that, did some of the discussion, it's time to write it all out, document it, make it legal, right? So you all have this. This is the document that we use. And maybe I'll show them some of the little pages as we go. Okay. So I'm going to show you in the packet. There's the first section, gives you instructions basically. And then I'm trying to see on page
3.
On page 2 is where you put your information, who you choose as your patient advocate. You'll see it's pretty simply stated, and any alternates. Then on page 3, this is what will make it the legal document.
So it's in the folder part that we're going through.
Yeah, it's like in the pocket. It should be stapled together.
Well, it's probably not stapled.
Is it not?
They have folders.
Oh, okay. So I'll wait for people to see it. But you'll see it. It says, the patient signature page. And so it needs to be signed and dated by you, the patient, and by 2 witnesses dated the same date. That's the ideal way to do it. Who witnesses?
The legal way to do it.
Yes. The witnesses cannot be the person who is appointed as the patient advocate. So if it's your daughter can't sign as a witness. It cannot be anybody that's not an adult or under the age of 18. This one is a big one. Or related to you by blood, marriage, or adoption. So a lot of times we'll see witnesses' signatures are the daughter-in-law. And technically that they're not, they can't be a witness. The patient's physician or healthcare provider cannot witness. Or an employee of a healthcare facility, mental health, anybody who's medically, involved in your care. An employee of a life insurance provider, kind of makes sense. Or, to the best of your knowledge, somebody who is not entitled to, any part of their estate, the person's estate. who would benefit from their passing.
Neighbors, people say that all the time.
Yeah.
So who can I pick?
Yeah, I always say neighbor or friends. Like a
Friends.
lot of times you'll have a couple who are your friends. You get husband
People
and
who are
wife.
sitting at this table with you
Yeah.
in this room.
Yeah, actually, you guys as a group is a great way to do it because you guys meet, right? So say it's months down the line and you're like, hey, remember that presentation? I need somebody to be my witnesses, right? So
The bank tellers are notaries, and while the document does not require a notary, they're accustomed to witnessing documents. So they're usually a good source as well.
yeah, that's good. And then the next step is really sharing it. And like Linda was saying, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Does the witness have to be present when you sign this?
Yes, yes.
So like you would fill it out. You can fill it out, leave it blank. Then when you go find your witnesses, you sign it when they're signing it.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? Okay.
So they don't have to be there when you write it out.
Right. Not when you write out the whole document. Yeah.
So this does not have to be done at a lawyer's office, or does it have to be notarized? These documents coming from the hospital are considered legal and
Yes.
Yep.
In
What-
any healthcare, in all of Michigan, this meets the Michigan statute requirements.
Yeah, which is nice because a lot of people do think you have to go to a lawyer and spend $1,000 getting it done, and you don't.
In the moment of crisis, is the hospital really going to check out your witnesses?
What happened? Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens is when you submit, what we would ask you to do is that you share it with us before an event. So when you submit it through MyChart or at your doctor's office or whatever, we would review it to make sure that it met the legal standard. And if it didn't, we should be denying it then. Why would we do that? So first off, the whole purpose of the document being witnessed is to ensure that you are doing this voluntarily, that no one is forcing you to do it. You appear of sound mind. So those are the reasons. So it is a legal document. So would we not accept it at all if it was improperly witnessed? We would look to it as guidance, but if there was a question about, I don't believe my mom did that, then we would probably have to pause, get ethics involved, have other people involved. Like if another family member doubted the validity of it because it wasn't properly executed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're trying to avoid any kind of conflict, which is why we also say share it with all of your family, not just the patient advocate, so that another relative doesn't come forward and say, I don't believe this. They've all heard the same information.
Yeah.
So sorry.
No, that's okay. So again, discussing those choices with your family and the people closest to you, even if they're not the patient advocate. So say you have 5 children and 2 are in state, you want them to be first and second, right? And so, but you still want to communicate that with the other children so they're not coming back saying, that's not what mom wanted. It's just letting everybody know that information about what you want. You can change or revoke the advance directive at any time. So if something changes, then you can do another one or revoke it. You're encouraged to revisit the document yearly and make changes as necessary. The document does not expire. So it's not like it has to be done every 5 years. The advance directive document will be uploaded into your electronic medical record if you give it to somebody. Like if you have a Corewell Health physician, I work in geriatrics at our office. That's one of the things we ask for, and we just put it right into your electronic record. Yep.
So what I think you're saying is that you need to either visit the hospital or someplace to make sure that you have a copy of this that gets downloaded into your own personal system, into your that heart thing.
Into your the MyBowman chart.
Somewhere that will notarize the fact that you have done this by free will. I mean, like, what if somebody was just fooling around and had everything filled out, but the hospital's never seen it before and it's not available on your,
If it's not in your chart,
record.
right, right.
If it's not available, then the stress becomes, can your family locate it, if anyone knows it exists, or it's not going to be honored because it's not available. So we ask people not to share the document with your medical provider, with the healthcare system where you receive care. Some people say, well, Beaumont, Corewell Health East, is my hospital, but a closer hospital to me is Ascension. So then you would want to make sure that possibly it was available in both health systems, because in an emergency, you might be brought to a different hospital.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, isn't there a central?
There's no statewide repository, unfortunately, in the state of Michigan.
Because
So-
you could be in a different state, a different country.
And we recommend that you carry your document with you, or that, in today's day and age, you can have it on your phone. If you have a smartphone, or you can have it electronically, or your patient advocate can have it electronically and get it to someone.
Yes, especially like if your patient advocate has a copy and something happens where the EMS is taking you to the hospital and say, oh, you hadn't sent it to any of the hospital systems. Talk with your patient advocate when you're having these conversations. Make sure you have it close by so that if something happens to me, grab that document, right? Bring it to the hospital.
Does the health insurance company have a record of it? Can you give it to the health insurance? Because they always check for your health insurance.
So so I'll say this. In an emergency, we are not checking health insurance, right? We're taking care of you emergently. So this is for the scenario of if emergently somebody needs access to it. If it's not emergent, yes, then someone else can go to your house and look for it or find it. But we're talking about those scenarios that we might not have the time. I would personally not share this with my health insurance policy. That's just me. I don't know where they would store it and who it would be accessible to. And in today's day and age, that changes a lot.
Yeah.
I have a friend who lives in a different state, and they, with her advance directive, they said that she should keep it on her refrigerator.
Yes.
And she didn't want to do that and look at it every day. So they said
that's valid.
It could be in a tube and freezer, and they provided a tube.
That's interesting.
I've heard, I don't know how our EMS are directed, but in Michigan, typically our emergency, when EMS comes out to a home, they go to where medication is kept or your refrigerator. So it is not uncommon for us to tell people that important documents such as your medication list, or if you have a DNR, do not resuscitate medical order, that be on your refrigerator so that they see it when they come into the home. Part of the reason for sharing the document proactively ahead of time is to avoid that having to worry about keeping it on your refrigerator. Yes.
I'm just wondering what Julie said. We submitted our Beaumont.
Oh, yeah. Years and years ago.
Yeah, you go to a doctor's appointment that you've seen them last year, and they want to check all your. Yeah, so I wouldn't be real comfortable even thinking that it would still be there. I mean, I think.
So if anyone has a document that you've previously given to a provider in our medical system or some other fashion, like at the hospital, and you want to check, if you email the email address, right now it says respectingchoices@beaumont.org. If you email, I will look for it and validate whether in fact it's there. The problem with some of, and I'm saying this with love, for our providers and for others, we tell you how important this is. So we have an obligation, before we ask you again about it, that we should be looking. But we haven't hardwired that yet. So people tend to ask because there is a regulation, a law, this Patient Self-Determination Act, that we do have to ask you every time you present for care whether in fact you have an advance directive document. What I do is if you called me, I would say, oh, I see a document. It's dated 2014, and you named your son Jim as your patient advocate. Is that still the document that's on that you're speaking of? So I would validate it. We're trying to hardwire that so that providers and others look first and then, instead of just asking. Because you do lose credibility in us. I understand that. And that's not what we want.
Well, I wasn't intending that.
No, but it's true. It is true.
But you're right. Yeah, you're right. It could be buried in there. And yep.
Even like they make you fill out things with medication lists, and you got it's in the chart.
I know.
Do you ever look at the chart? We have the chart.
Well, some of it truly is that validation that just because it's there, is it accurate? So, trust me, the healthcare systems are not perfect, but we are working to do better.
Yeah, and now in the Beaumont chart, there is a specific place for advanced care planning documents. That's part of what I do is when we ask people to bring it in, I look it over, make sure it's legal. We do this together, me and Linda. And then I make sure it's in that advanced care planning tab, so they have tried to make it easier for people to find it.
Well, on here, it says on page 1 of 5.
Who you've given it to.
Changes to your advanced care directive at any time. We recommend you update your document every few years or follow this 5D rule, which they're saying every new decade of your life updated after the death of a loved one, etc. So,
yeah.
That's meant to give you like a hint to, should I make any changes? It doesn't, you may not have any changes to make.
Right.
But
more
it's
like
not
review.
uncommon for someone to say, that person is no longer in my life. So I don't want them making decisions.
Beaumont is now Corwell.
Yes.
Still there, right?
If documents are still there, and if you ever want to validate, if you just send an email or make a phone call to the number in the chart, the number in the packet, we'll be happy to look for you and validate it.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on because I think we're running out of time. Okay. All right.
Great discussion.
Yeah. And that brings us to conversation starters, because sometimes it's hard to start the conversation when, like we were saying, it's a difficult topic at times, right? So remember how Aunt Ruth in the family died. Was it a good death, hard death? How will yours be different? Especially if, like you said, there was a recent person who passed and, the family was involved. You can sit down and say, okay, after that experience, here's what I want, I was thinking about what happened with Grandma. It made me realize this is what I want or don't want. Even though I'm okay right now, because that's a big one. But nothing's wrong with you, right? Right? Why are we having this conversation? I'm worried that if you have a heart condition, I may have a heart attack. I want to be prepared. I want, like Linda was saying, I don't want you, my patient advocate, to not know what I want and be left holding the emotional bag, right? I just finished answering some questions, went to this presentation about what I want for end of life. Do you want to see my answers? I'm wondering about what your answers would be. Would you be willing to do something that maybe you don't agree with, but that I want, right?
I like to reframe that it's not about necessarily end of life. I say it's how do I want to live, however long that is. That if we just start thinking about end of life, we get really caught up on whether we're old, whether we're not old, whether we're sick, whether we're not sick. We want it to be like, how do you want to live? Did that just shut up?
Yeah, I think the battery just died, but that's okay because we're at the end anyway. I can go over these questions.
Well, I was going to respond to
Okay.
the question that you had about how do you initiate a conversation with someone who doesn't want to talk about this? And that's hard. I think some of those suggestions could be an icebreaker, we call it. And then we have to be respectful. The reason why your document is witnessed is to make sure no one is forcing you to do it, that you're doing it of free will. So there are people who are never going to do this type of planning. They aren't. And there are people that aren't going to want to, for whatever reason, superstition, if I talk about it, it's going to happen, like magical thinking. There are people who don't want to entertain any conversation about this. And then you're going to be left with trying to reflect upon what you know about them, and that may or may not be accurate, but that's the best that you can do. So we recognize that. Not everyone, it's not like we go out in the community and people say like, yeah, I want to do this. Thank you, I've been waiting. It's something that just for many people, it's hard to think about. And what you can minimally ask is just, who would you trust to be that decision maker? Sometimes thinking about those other things, the imagine this scenario, the CPR, those are what we call optional worksheets. So they aren't part of the legal document, they're just optional. Some people aren't going to fill those out. That's okay. At least if we know who they would trust, that's what's important.
So why is it optional? This is the most important decision, whether or not the person wants CPR. That's what they're going to ask you. I've been to the hospital with my dad and my mother, okay? If you say no, they'll die, essentially, if they're at that point.
Right.
So if they have checked that they wanted, at least you knew what they wanted. So I don't know why this is optional.
Because again, it's, so when a person can tell us what they want, they're their own decision maker.
Right.
So this only comes into play when you cannot tell anyone what you want, for whatever reason, temporarily or permanently. We also recognize that these decisions don't stay the same. The way I answer a CPR question today might be completely different in 15 years from now or in 20 years. And because the documents don't expire, so it's a treatment preference. We want you to think about it and talk about it, but we can't insist that someone make a CPR decision.
So the date on there, I mean, there's no witness or anything for
No.
CPR. The date
Correct.
can be different than
Yes.
the other.
Yes.
Or it could be crossed out and changed again and again.
Well, that part is a treatment preference, so you could just make a different treatment preference form if you wanted, or you could probably one line through, initial, and a new date.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
actually about DNRs, right? If they wanted to do that, or should we not get into?
Does anyone have a question if they knew that they did not want to receive CPR, how they would go about documenting that?
Yes.
You do have a question. Okay. So the CPR sheet in your document we talk about as being an optional page. It's a preference. It's at this moment, would I want attempts to restart my heart and breathing, yes or no? If you knew for certain, under no circumstance, no matter what, no matter where, you do not want to receive CPR, you do not want attempts to restart your heart and breathing. So your heart and breathing have stopped, you don't want attempts to restart them. Then you need to have a document that's called an out-of-hospital, do not resuscitate medical order. Because if something were to happen here, and we called EMS, they can't just not respond because you've checked on a form. No, they have to have a medical order. You work in a hospital. Right? I'm guessing you work in a hospital. Isn't it? So in a hospital, even a nurse at bedside, if there's not an order from the physician, she needs to get an order. Otherwise, she's operating outside the scope of practice. So if you know for certain that that's a decision that you've made for whatever reason, that'd be something very important to discuss with your physician. And if you want to reach out, again, through the email or the phone number, we could get you that document. It's either called the community or out-of-hospital DNR, do not resuscitate order.
My guess is that the average person probably would say, of course I want CPR.
Yes.
But looking at this chart, it says if you receive CPR and they're in the hospital,
What's your
25 or 26% of you will walk out, and the rest will be
will leave?
incapacitated, or
It
what?
doesn't say walk out. It says will live to leave the hospital.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a difference. I want you all to know that's an important distinction. Walking out is different than being able to leave the hospital. Which is why we ask people to learn more about cardiopulmonary resuscitation. It can be extremely successful, but it's not successful for everyone. And so it's important to learn more about that and to talk with your physician. A lot of it depends upon where you live, where you are, how soon somebody is able to intervene. All contribute to the success rate. What other medical problems you have?
What about the Good Samaritan, or used to be called the Good Samaritan thing, if you come upon somebody or in a restaurant or whatever, you do CPR, and you supposedly are supposed to try to perform it without being sued if it doesn't work for like a layperson.
Yes.
I don't think, I mean, I don't know, but does that count? I mean, if somebody else, like if one of us starts CPR and then the EMS comes and they take over, there hasn't been any decision on that, except maybe in a drawer at their house or something.
Are you talking about legally? I'm sorry.
Yes, I think I am talking legally.
So you're asking if someone were to start, like a untrained professional were to begin to perform CPR, and then EMS came in and resumed care, and it was not successful? Is that what you're asking?
Well, what I'm saying is that being a teacher, you take this class.
You take CPR as a teacher.
And what they say is, I mean, as I recall, that you started, the sooner it started, the better.
Correct. The sooner it started, the more successful.
You probably should do it, well, get the AED or whatever and call EMS. And I just wondered how that fits into this scenario.
Okay. So if you knew that you didn't want CPR and you had a medical order and you were at a meeting like this, like so you are ambulatory, you get out, you go places, you should have what we call a DNR bracelet, because that is recognized as a medical order. You can't get that without sending in your medical order. So that would be something that people would look at immediately before initiating CPR. I think, is that the question that you're asking? Because if you have something at home on your refrigerator and you're here, it's not here. Yes.
I guess what I'm saying is it's a lot more, it seems to be a lot more complicated than I ever thought.
It is complicated for a good reason, because it's not always well understood. And we want to make sure that people understand and make a decision that is in alignment with what's important to them and their values. Yes.
Should your advocate be on the patient's HIPAA forms?
So a lot of times that is a fear or concern. People will say, well, if I name my son, then are they making my medical decisions? Do they have access to all my medical records? That's only if you give them MyChart proxy access or access. once their role as a patient advocate has been activated, meaning 2 physicians or a physician and a licensed psychologist have determined you cannot make your own medical decisions, they've signed their patient advocate acceptance, and they're now active, we would want to make sure that they then had access to information through your MyChart, and HIPAA would be, I don't want to say waived, but they would have access to your medical information to best make decisions for you. But you don't have to give that to them ahead of time, but it's helpful if they know about your medical conditions.
But it's up to you, right?
It's up to you.
You have that choice. Like you may, sign a release of information for, just the first person or whoever you want to be able to share that information with. It doesn't matter if you have an advance directive or not, right? Really. But that knowing that advance directive will go into effect if you can't make your own decisions, it's automatically going to go there. So it's a personal choice how much information you share with your loved one or with your patient advocate ahead of time about your medical care.
What's the reason for pulling it from them?
For not giving them access? Because some people want autonomy. We all know, okay, so this stuff gets messy because families and all this stuff is not always
cut and dry, or Pollyanna-ish, right? Yeah.
So there are times where some family members, and while you would trust them to be your patient advocate, when you can't make decisions, right now they're a little bit too bossy and want to take over. So some people will say, I trust my son, but not yet. Like, he can wait until later. I'll share what I want to share. Does that sort of make sense?
Our office hears that a lot. Like, they love their child. They want them involved from arm's length, right? And sometimes, as time goes on, they're like, okay, now I'm ready.
Right.
Now I'm ready to bring them to appointments with me. I can't drive anymore. I can't see as well. So then you kind of decide when you want to bring them in on it. So, and like Linda said, there's step families, lots of children versus your siblings might have differences of opinion. So it depends on how well you really know.
Children versus spouses,
yes.
Spouses versus children.
Yeah.
So you all had excellent questions, I have to say. You're very engaged, and we hope we gave you some good information to think about, to begin to make some plans if you haven't already done planning. If you have any other questions, if you want assistance, we are available. If you reach out by email or phone, someone, most likely me, will be in touch, and we'll try to make this as easy as possible, because we know that it's not an easy thing to think about and plan for. So we truly appreciate the opportunity. You're a great, very engaged group, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.